Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for taking time away from your lunch to join us on today's important session. We're going to be talking about Bill 88, along with a few other important issues facing the independent contracting market. Just to give you a little bit of background on what we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves first. I hope you don't mind. Share a little bit with you about what we do and how we support the independent staffing or the independent contractor market and the staffing agencies who support them. We're going to talk about the benefits of incorporation, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Bill 213. And then the big question that everyone's wondering about, Bill 88, what is this? What is this all about? How is this affecting the independent contractor market? And then we're going to circle back to the personal service business or personal service corporation risk, which is related to the benefits of those incorporations. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So with me today, I have my colleagues Rachel Stedman and Karen Perez. They work with my team to support you as staffing agencies, as well as our independent contractors, and are often the first line of information from our organization. And if you are a staffing agency and need some help and support, I encourage you to reach out and connect with them. We do offer a variety of support and help throughout the year, including some guides that we have specific to the agencies, as well as we can assist with the ever important incorporation process to make sure we can get your independent contractors supported and incorporated as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to kick us off and tell you a little bit about ourselves, if you don't mind. So my name is Andrew Wall. I'm the managing partner of CPA4IT. CPA4IT is an accounting firm that has been specializing in the independent contracting market since 1984. It was founded originally by my father, George Wall, who was one of the leaders in the personal service business risk issue. It was one of the first accountants in Canada to really recognize that the independent staffing or independent contractor market was a viable strategy, as opposed to other markets like the US, where it's not quite as viable. We fought vehemently to defend the rights of the independent contractors. We've been very successful over the years. We also work with a number of staffing agencies, as I said earlier, and we are a member of the National Association of Computer Consulting Businesses. And I just came off a really exciting meeting with the members of the NACCB, where I got the latest update on all the lobbying efforts that they have been making to support the independent contracting industry. And so I'm really excited to share with you some information about Bill 88, as well as some of the other initiatives that are going on to support the industry, including issues around WSIB and temporary employment agencies. I guess the big question from a lot of you is, why do independent contractors choose to work with us, and why do staffing agencies choose to work with us? And I think that really stems from our mission, which is to help entrepreneurs organize their finances, create wealth, and transform wealth into a legacy. So our goal is to help our clients get their information organized, build wealth, usually inside a corporation, and be able to transform that wealth into a legacy that is something that they have that lives well beyond them, and they're able to use the equity that they build up in this corporation to support themselves in retirement and hopefully transfer that on to their children or an important cause to them. So we have lots of things that we do to support that industry, many of which is working with the staffing agencies. So oftentimes the staffing agencies will have an independent contractor that needs or has a bunch of questions about the benefits of incorporating and, should they take this contract? And, the staffing agencies really got to be careful about, encouraging or incentivizing the applicant to make a decision between temporary or, contract work or full-time employment. And so this is where we can come in. We can provide the independent contractor the benefits of what independent contracting brings to them. We can talk about the risks and the pros and the cons, and we do that all free of charge. So there's no charge to the independent contractor, there's no charge to the staffing agencies, and in fact, we provide a priority service to those staffing agencies. So if you have a relationship with us, we provide landing pages for you guys with all the useful documents that you often get asked for and questions. We've got some top 5 FAQs, which we're going to share with you guys today. And a whole bunch of other supporting information that we've built up over the years, things like, our calculator that can show an independent contractor the financial benefit of what they would have in their pocket at the end of the day if they chose to incorporate. We also offer a turnkey solution, which means we do the incorporation services as well as the accounting and tax. So we can, again, rush and expedite those incorporations when necessary to make sure that that contract gets signed and confirmed as soon as possible. And then for the independent contractors themselves, we do provide industry benchmarking that shows them how they compare against the industry averages. And we've been doing this, like I said, since 1984. So we've been built up a pretty healthy database, and we're able to show our independent contractors the opportunities where they might be below average in expenses and missing out on opportunities for deductions, as well as identify those risks when they might be potentially flagged for an audit. And one of the great things that we do provide is audit representation protection. So if our clients are ever audited for any of the work that we've done, we will represent them up until the third and final stages of appeals within CRA at no additional cost to them. So this is a tremendous value and gives the independent contractor the peace of mind, because sometimes, quite often, that's one of the number one concerns. This is all new to them. They're not familiar with it. They're concerned. So we want to give them that peace of mind that we're there to support them. And of course, the key to being able to support them is this industry expertise that we built up over the multiple decades that we've been specializing in the industry. And having relationships with organizations like the NACCB and working directly with staffing agencies to understand the issue and understand the ways that we can support the industry has been absolutely critical. So there are a number of things that we as accountants do to make sure we're providing value. And some of this is obviously a little bit generic, but the bottom line is our job here is to help our clients mitigate risk and maximize opportunity. And we're here to do that same thing for the staffing agencies as well. So if there's any support that we can provide to you, asking questions or answering questions around T4As and why you should do them and where you should put information in what boxes, if you have questions about your own T2200, if your employer provides that, if you have any questions that we can help support, we're here to do just that for you. But one of the main reasons, as I said earlier, that most staffing agencies work with us is because they have that independent contractor who's never been on contract before, and they need to incorporate, set up their GST number, and get all that information that's really necessary to get that contract rolling. And that's a really important factor that we play within this system. And what we do is help our independent contractors understand the benefits of incorporation, and then we help them to assist them with that incorporation process, and then as well help them with the ongoing filing requirements. Because really the only downside to a corporation is that there is a cost to set it up and there is a cost to maintain that. And we try to make that as painless as we possibly can. Now I'm going to loop in one of my colleagues, Rachel Stedman, who does our initial consultations, and she's going to share with you guys a little bit of the benefits of incorporation that we go through with our independent contractors, because this is, often the number one place in which the agencies are reaching out to us. So Rachel, do you want to tell them a little bit about the benefits of incorporating?
Definitely. Thank you very much, Andrew. So yes, I think one of the main benefits that individuals think of when they're looking at incorporating is the fact that you get to significantly reduce your taxes. So an individual who is operating through a corporation, you are subjected to pay 12.2% on any retained earnings that you've left within the corporation. So very important, you're not paying the tax on the full income coming in your company, but after all of your different expenses, whatever it's left, what I like to call the profits. So most people just think about a corporation as only one mechanism of paying less tax, which it is a key reason why a lot of individuals do incorporate, but there are a lot more benefits that a corporation can provide to you. And some of the other benefits include the fact that you get to build a corporate retirement fund, okay, which is very important. So for a lot of individuals that have been in the industry for quite some time, it is very important that you're leaving money within your corporation. So you're building that a bit as a bit of a nest egg, a pension fund for yourself down the road. So a corporation can facilitate that, for example, a sole proprietorship would not be able to do. And unless you're working as a T4 employee, whereby you maybe have a pension with your own company, or again, you're relying on having to do that on your own through RSPs or different mechanisms to save for your retirement. So that is definitely another added benefit that the corporation has. Another large one is getting a tax-free loan from a company. So again, many times people think about it as, okay, I'm leaving money in the company. In Ontario, I'm only paying 12.2% corporate taxes on whatever money I leave in the company. But some individuals are maybe looking to tap into some of the funds from the corporation a little bit earlier than retirement. So for example, someone's looking to buy a house, you're looking to buy a car. So there are different strategies that a corporation can provide, such as taking a loan out of your corporation for these things. And you're able to access these loans tax-free, okay? So again, another benefit by building up money within your company. Again, there's always the option of receiving tax-free retirement dividends. So when paying yourself from the corporation, there are different options to draw money out, either as an employment income, where an individual is issued a T4 slip, or dividends income, where an individual is issued a T5 slip. So again, that's also a way that you can draw money out of the corporation when you're reaching your retirement stage. So you can tap into that money as dividends income from your corporation prior to you tapping into any other form of retirements that you may have, CPP or etc. Another huge benefit as well includes smoothing income. So if an individual is working as a sole proprietorship, for example, or even as an employee, whatever income that you are generating as an employee, you're subject to pay personal tax on that. As a sole proprietorship, whatever income you're generating minus your expenses, you are then subjected to pay personal taxes on whatever is left after all your deductions. But as we know, some of the harsh realities of working as a self-employed individual is that there are years where, you might have 3 months, 6 months, a year where there's no money coming into the corporation. So by being able to shelter money within your corporation, you can choose how much money that you want to give to yourself as employment income. So rather than, for example, having high and low years of employment income through a sole proprietorship, because you might have 1 year where you're working actively 12 months and another year where you're only working 3 months, by sheltering all the money within the corporation, regardless of the fact that you may have high and low years of income coming into the corporation, you have the ability to take out the same amount of income as personal income from the company year over year, whereby you're smoothing your income and keeping yourself as a reasonable tax bracket year over year, rather than have those peaks and lows. Because of course, if you have high years, you're looking at paying a substantially higher amount of personal tax on whatever money you're taking out in those highs and lows years. There's also protection of your personal assets, which is also very key. So part of the benefits of having a corporation is that it does allow you that limited liability, okay? Whereby, because the company is a separate entity than that of you as an individual, you are able to protect your personal assets, which is definitely very key for a lot of individuals that are working as self-employed. And of course, there are several additional tax and financial strategies available. Individuals have the option, if you're looking to create holding companies through the corporation, if you want to be able to have a personal pension plan. So there are so many more opportunities and benefits that a corporation provides than that of only, paying less tax, okay? So that is definitely something that's quite important. Then on to the next slide, we are then also going to be discussing in terms of, some of the top 5 mistakes made when incorporating. So for this one, I'm going to have my colleague Karen take on. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. So I like starting on this slide saying the following: you get what you pay for. Yes, it is cheaper to incorporate online. Now you can do it. Everyone can do it. You can pay the government fee and have your incorporation in a couple of days. However, it comes up to be a bit more expensive at the end, realizing that you have made a couple of mistakes in your incorporation, and now you need to pay a professional to fix these mistakes, right? So one of the biggest mistakes is including your spouse as a director. This is only creating liability. There will be some cases where the spouse requires to be included as director, but we suggest you to speak to a professional for this. Failing to prepare your initial minutes and corporate minute book. Your initial minutes are documents, they're legal documents that are completed by a corporate paralegal like myself, a lawyer, or an accountant. And these documents are not provided to you by the government when you complete your incorporation. They're important as they have information such as shareholders information, officers information, head office of the business. This information then is input into your corporate tax return and then submitted to the Canada Revenue Agency. So it is critical to have these documents completed right away after the incorporation has been submitted. In proper share structure of the company, again, starting right from the beginning, we like having the share structure of the corporation done correctly, so you don't have to come back again and pay fees to someone to complete resolutions for you. Opting for a number corporation. I mean, if you're already incorporating and paying for an incorporation, you would be better off doing a name company instead. It also decreases personal service business, and obviously not hiring a professional accountant. Rachel, if you don't mind, or Andrew, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Now, I want to talk very quickly about the top 5 questions about incorporation. How long does the incorporation take? To be honest, these incorporations don't take long, a couple of hours. If one of your team members is looking to have a contract moving quick, you can either contact me or my colleague, Rachel Stedman. We are the people that normally will meet for the initial consultations. I would say 3 hours tops. What takes a bit longer is normally the HST registration. It can be around 2 business days. I have incorporated what is my fiscal year end. Well, the fiscal year end really goes based on which is the incorporation date of your company, right? There is a limit of how long we can extend a fiscal year end. And just as an FYI, we normally try to not go for December 31st fiscal year ends. It's a busy time for everyone. It's a busy time for the firm. So we encourage clients to try to find a fiscal year end that will facilitate everyone's time and that will benefit your company as well. Now, do I have to have 2 signatures, president, secretary? President and secretary are officer positions, and when you pay for the incorporation and you have share certificates to be issued, the president and the secretary have to sign the share certificate. So yes, at CPF or IT, we can actually complete that for you. We can file your initial return, which includes the officer position, so we can complete all that for you. Now, I'm incorporated. What do I do? We do send you a checklist of what is required, but pretty much when someone comes to open a corporation, we complete all the full package for them. And we provide a digital minute book where you can access your corporation documents 24/7. I'm on a work permit. Can I still incorporate? Yes, you can incorporate. And my colleague Rachel is going to take over this with a bit more detail there.
Thank you, Karen. So yes, so this is actually a very important topic for a lot of recruitment firms, because in the past, if you ever had a contractor that was on an open work permit, and very specifically an open work permit, they were not eligible to set up an incorporation. So which means that if you were looking to hire on the individual, it would have to be either that of a sole proprietor or as a T4 temp employee. Okay, but as of last year, Bill 213 removed the residency restrictions in terms of setting up a corporation. So what that means is in the past, you needed to be a permanent resident in Canada in order to be able to be eligible to set up a corporation. But since they have removed that residency requirement, that means that an individual in Canada on an open work permit now meets the requirements to be able to establish a corporation. So that is very good for a lot of, again, a lot of firms that are not particularly working if individuals are sole proprietors, and for individuals on work permit that are forced to take up an opportunity as a T4 employee. Now, although you are eligible, the individuals are eligible to set up the corporation, the only bit of a difference is that they are not eligible for the 12.2% small business tax rate. So this 12.2% small business tax rate is eligible only for an individual that is Ontario resident, okay, whereby the company is owned by a Canadian resident. So if someone's on a work permit, one, they can set up the company, but two, it means that they are a foreign individual owning a Canadian corporation. So then that means that their tax rate jumps from 12.2 instead to over 35%. So it is a little bit higher. Okay, although it is a bit higher, there are still benefits for the individuals, especially if they're, let's say, in Canada on a work permit, but eventually going to get their permanent residency. So, of course, once they become a resident, that changes for them. And as well, depending on if the individuals we've taken up the position as a T4 employee or sole proprietor, depending on what their tax bracket is, they could still be paying upwards of 40+%. Okay, of personal tax rates rather than the 30% through the corporation. So there is still a bit of a benefit, even if they were not eligible for that 12.2%. Now, this change in the residency has been implemented in several jurisdictions across Canada, with the exception of federally in Manitoba, Quebec, and Saskatchewan. So those are the only 4 provinces that still require, I should say, my apologies, 4 jurisdictions that still require that an individual be a Canadian resident in order to be able to establish a corporation, whereas all the other provinces have removed that residency requirement. Okay, Andrew, so you can take it on.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate you
You're welcome.
doing such an amazing job in Karen as well. And now let me get us on to Bill 88, which is probably the big question people are wondering about. What is Bill 88? What's it all about? Why is it important to me in the staffing industry? So on April 11th in 2022, Bill 88, the Working for Workers Act, became law, and it enacts a Digital Platform Workers' Rights Act of 2022 and makes some amendments to the Employment Standards Act of 2000. And the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1990, and even the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades of 2006. So why does that matter, and how does that impact the industry? So some of you might have been familiar with a number of the class actions that were going on in film and television, as well as the IT industry, where you had a number of independent contractors who had worked as independent contractors, had a contract as an independent contractor, filed their tax returns as an independent contractor, reaped all the rewards of the incorporation entity that we just talked about, that Rachel and Karen shared with you, all those benefits. But at the end, for whatever reason, wanted to come back and claim that they were an employee and search out the benefits that employees were eligible for, including severance, vacation pay, benefits, all those things that go along with full-time employment. This was potentially incredibly dangerous to the industry, because you can imagine, as an end client or a staffing agency, one of the reasons that you're able to pay independent contractors more on an hourly rate basis is because you don't have those costs of severance and vacation pay and benefits. And it is a really big differentiator between the independent contractor. Unfortunately, a lot of the legislation, primarily the Employment Standards Act, didn't recognize the evolution of the knowledge worker and how this industry has changed over the years. Now, if any of you did hear about Bill 88, you probably only heard about it because of the new minimum standards for the digital platform workers, and this portable benefits concept that's come out of that. And that's really targeted at the gig economy workers, those Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and Uber Eats, which is very different from the knowledge economy. And in fact, a lot of the work that helped enable Bill 88 was done by the work of the NACCB, the National Association of Computer Consulting Businesses. I personally was involved in some of these lobbying efforts that we did to the provincial government. We're working with the Ministry of Labor, as well as other ministers, to try and implement these changes, because we were rightfully very concerned that as long as these class actions were taking place, there was the danger that the entire industry could be destroyed as a result, because then clients ultimately wouldn't want to work with the situations where they were basically, we had some bad actors, a few bad apples, who are trying to play both sides of the fence, reap all the rewards of being an independent contractor while simultaneously trying to get all the benefits of being an employee. So thankfully, as a result of this, we were able to get Bill 88 passed. What that ultimately meant was there were some new definitions added to the Employment Standards Act. There's a number of changes that came out of Bill 88, but this is ultimately what impacts our industry. So we now have these new sections, and subsection 1.1 of the Employment Standards Act has been amended to add the following definitions: a business consultant, as well as an information technology consultant. These are new definitions that have been added to the Employment Standards Act. And the purpose of this is because we want to be able to say, hey, the knowledge worker, the independent contractor, is different from a normal employee. And as such, they have different rights. Because the Employment Standards Act is there to establish the rights for employees. And so what we got with Bill 88 is an exemption to the Employment Standards Act for independent contractors. And this is really important because prior to this, no exemption existed, and this enabled independent contractors to play both sides of the fence and to have those bad apples potentially destroy the entire industry. So the sort of tragedy of the commons story. And what also came into this is some new wording that says, well, I'm not going to read the whole thing here. For those of you who are interested, you can read it. But I want to point out one really important criteria. I always forget you can't highlight. So if you see right down here, it says a couple of the criteria for being exempt from the Employment Standards Act. There's 4 of them. And number 2 says there's an agreement for the consultant services that sets out the consultant will be paid and the amount the consultant will be paid, which must be equal to or greater than $60 per hour. So the reason that this line in the sand came to be is because in working with the government and in our lobbying efforts, the government was very concerned about protecting the vulnerable worker. And ultimately, they really perceived that to be the gig economy workers. We were able to successfully demonstrate to the government that the knowledge worker is not a vulnerable worker. They're a highly skilled, highly educated professional that knows and understands the risks that they are taking by working as an independent contractor. And yes, as an independent contractor, you are taking risk. By definition, you are taking risk in order to not be deemed a PSB, PSC, which we will talk about in a second. So a line in the sand ultimately had to be drawn. We were hoping for that line in the sand to be a little bit lower, but ultimately where the government came back is they said $60 an hour is the line in the sand. So if you are a staffing agency and you are working with independent contractors who are making less than $60 an hour, there's nothing that says you can't work with those independent contractors. But what it does say is that they are not exempt from the Employment Standards Act. So those people are potentially able to continue to still play both sides of the fence. So that might ultimately affect whether you want to work with independent contractors below $60 an hour. And I know some agencies are choosing to say, hey, $60 an hour is our cutoff. The government has made this line in the sand and we're sticking to it. If you're over $60 an hour, you can be an independent contractor. If you're below $60 an hour, then you're going to be a temporary employee. So ultimately, that's the decision of each individual agency to figure out what path forward that they would like to go. It's important to note also in section 1 that there does allow for both corporations and sole proprietorships. So just because the person has to make at least $60 an hour to be exempt, they don't have to be incorporated. The reality is, if you go through any of our calculators or talk with any of our teams, very few people making over $60 an hour wouldn't benefit from setting up a corporation, at least financially. Yes, there are some added cost of setting up a corporation and some added costs of maintaining that, but those are far outweighed by the financial benefits that you'll have with a corporation at that $60 an hour. Oftentimes, we were asked over the years, what's that magic number? The truth is there is no magic number in which a corporation makes sense as far as an hourly rate. There is a magic number as far as how much money you're leaving inside your corporation. So if you're making $60 an hour, but you spend every dollar you earn, a corporation may still not make sense. But also if you're earning less than $60 an hour, but you're a good saver, or you have a spouse that's got a full-time income that you're able to use for your non-deductible lifestyle expenses, then there could very well be benefits to incorporating, at least at the financial side, let alone the non-financial side of, hey, you've got limited liability, you've got the ability to work with more clients, because some clients just flat out say, I don't work with sole props for various reasons, which we won't get into today. But it just sort of opens up your market as far as who you can work with. Sorry for all those bells and whistles. But that's ultimately the impact of Bill 88 and how it affects the independent contracting industry. As I said, the result of Bill 88 is, or the Bill 88 is the result of a lot of lobbying efforts done by the industry to support and protect the independent contractor market. We're also working on some work on WSIB, and there have been some changes within what was going to happen with Bill or with WSIB, and you guys might have seen some changes. For those of you that you may not still be happy with the outcome that we got, but we are seeing a change in WSIB rates from about 0.13 cents to about 0.23 cents. But that's substantially better than what it was going to be. Plus, there was going to be a gap between what the rate staffing agencies would pay versus the rate, say, an IBM or a Deloitte or a consulting house would pay. That's now on par. There's no benefit to one or the other. So those are some good changes. There's still some consulting going on that route as far as WSIB, and some work being done there. As well, the white paper on the temporary employment agencies and certification process just came out last night. So a lot of work we have, and I think until December 6th to give feedback on that. So there'll be more news certainly coming out on that. For those of you who are interested, there was a cost of joining that program, which was $50,000, which they've already dropped to $25,000, thanks to some of the feedback of the NACCB. But more changes hopefully to come on that yet. So a lot more information pending on that. And when we get it, we will be sharing that with you. But one of the other things the NACCB has done is over the years, we have fought and won many cases supporting personal service business risk. And some of you may never have even heard of personal service business risk, but it is the biggest threat facing the incorporated IT consultants and the entire independent contracting market. And what that is where CRA comes along and says, yes, we know you're incorporated. Yes, we know you have a contract, but we don't believe that you are an independent contractor. We believe that you're an employee. So in fact, it's section 125 of the Income Tax Act, and I'm going to read you the definition of a personal service business for those of you who'd like to know it. So a personal service business carried on by a corporation in a taxation year means a business of providing services where an individual who performs a service on behalf of the corporation, in this definition and paragraph referred to as an incorporated employee, or any person related to the incorporated employee, is a specified shareholder of the corporation, and the incorporated employee would, here's the key, would reasonably be regarded as an officer or employee of the person or partnership to whom or to which the services were provided, but for the existence of the corporation. So if you would reasonably be regarded as an employee, but for the existence of this corporation, and the only exception is unless the corporation employs in the business throughout the year more than 5 full-time employees. And there's a whole reason why that's 5 employees. If anyone ever wants to know, I'd happy to share with the story of where that came from. It had something to do with the Toronto Argonaut. Long story, I'll share it another time. So in the business throughout the year, more than 5 full-time employees, or the amount paid or payable to the corporation in the year for the services is received or receivable by it from a corporation with which it was associated in the year. So that's a long-winded definition of what a personal service business is, but it's basically where CRA comes in and says, you're not an independent contractor, you are an employee. Now you no longer get this small business tax rate that Rachel talked about earlier of 12.2%. In addition, we're going to disallow the majority of your expenses. We're also going to go back and we're going to look at at least 3 years of information, and we're going to charge penalties and interest. And some of the bills for this are tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the independent contractor, which, if the issue with ESA and Bill 88 was going to scare away the end clients, this has the potential to scare away the independent contractors. And we need both sides of that equation in order for the independent contracting model to work. So this has been something that has ebbed and flowed over the years. CRA has had various projects over the years where sometimes someone in CRA comes along and sees this or believes this to be low-hanging fruit, where they have all these independent contractors who they think they can go and reassess and tax and get all this tax money and fill the coffers of CRA. But I can tell you, over the years, we have been very, very successful in defending the rights of the independent contractor, starting all the way back to the early 80s and the WSIB door case, which was the first landmark precedent-setting case. And we'll tell you a bit more about that and what the criteria were set out in that case in just a second. But the bad news is that right now, CRA has announced a new special project that's been going on since June. They're basically in an outreach phase right now where they're asking for employers for information about people that they could deem to be independent or personal service businesses. They're assessing. I suspect we will see a renewed number of cases coming through in the new year. So it is now more important than ever before to be working with a professional who knows and understands this issue and how to protect the independent contractor's rights. Because unfortunately, if we get those precedents set, those precedents can be used against all the other independent contractors. Now, the reality is every case is ultimately judged on its individual merits, which is a bit hard because we, as the NACCB, have been searching for years to be able to say, okay, if you meet this, this, and this criteria, then CRA is going to leave you alone. But the judges have ultimately said, hey, it's always going to be judged on its own merits. And what those merits are is back in 1984, which was the first landmark precedent-setting case. The WSIB door case came out, 1986, and where they set out a couple of criteria. They said, hey, you have to have an ownership of tools, you have to have a risk for profit or loss, and you can't be an integral part of the process. So ownership of tools, there have been a number of cases since that in the knowledge worker environment, they have adequately proven that the knowledge that you bring to the role is the tools rather than the keyboard you bring. There's even a secret CPP bulletin out there that expressly talks about the IT industry and the concept of bring your own device and why that's not applicable and not okay in environments like major banking environments where you obviously can't bring in your own equipment for security reasons. The risk for profit or loss, we have a number of ways that we defend against that. But it is important to recognize that as an independent contractor, you do bear some risk for profit or loss. There are tools for mitigating that risk, liability insurance. There's tools for mitigating that risk by leveraging corporations to smooth income. But there is risk associated with being an independent contractor, and it's important to define and understand what that is. And as far as the integral part of the process, this has been something that has always been somewhat subjective. Let's just say that. And this is where the government might come along and ask you a question like, hey, do you abide by the policies and procedures of your end client? And if you say yes, you could be considered to be an integral part of the process. Whereas if you said, no, I have my own policies and procedures that mirror that of my end client so that I can be more effective, you wouldn't be deemed to be an integral part of the process. So there's really important language around this that we have built up over the years. And so the key here is not having the independent contractor put their foot in their mouth and knowing how to respond to these outreaches from CRA. And that's where the NACCB and ourselves come in. We provide sample responses as well as provide support to obviously our clients with that audit representation protection we talked about earlier. Now, since the WSIB door case, there has been a number of cases since then, some in our favor, some not in our favor. Thankfully, more in our favor. And in fact, even those cases that end up not going in our favor in tax court often get overridden in appeals and Supreme Court of Canada and then later overturned. But that does require money and support to be able to do that. And what CRA often does play on is the fact that a lot of these independent contractors might be assessed for a certain amount of money that it's not enough for them to justify going out and hiring a lawyer. And so they ultimately may settle on those cases to save aggravation and save money of supporting and defending that, which we as an industry want to discourage. Thankfully, again, through the work of the NACCB, the last time there was a special project, we retained the support of legal professionals specializing in this industry, and we fought and won over 130 separate individual cases on this. Unfortunately, every one of those cases was what they call a consent to judgment, which means ultimately that information is not necessarily jurisprudence that can be used going forward to sort of demonstrate why the IT industry should be exempt from the independent contracting market or from the personal service business issue. It also is not necessarily something that people outside of this conversation might be aware of because they were consent judgments and not cases that are available publicly. Now, since all these different cases have gone on, there have been some changes to ultimately the tests that the governments look at. So they still look at a control test. They still look at ownership of tools test. They still look for chance or risk of profit or loss, and they still look at the integration test. So they have this new sort of control test that has been added in there, and that's more about what to do versus how to do it. So this basically says the end client is certainly allowed to control what you do, but not how you do it. And again, this is another example of subjectivity and knowledge of language and knowledge of understanding what the traps are that are potentially in these outreach programs that they do. And so the number one thing we want to say is if there's an outreach program going on right now, please do not respond to those outreach programs without consulting a knowledgeable professional who knows and understands this issue. And there's a lot of brilliant accountants out there, and some of them have dealt with PSB and have knowledge and information to do on it, but some of them haven't and aren't familiar with it. So it really is important to work with a professional who really knows and understands these issues. You know, some of the things that we talk about protecting and defending our clients is obviously a detailed written contract, which is the one thing that is black and white. And it does either say that you're an independent contractor or you're an employee. Now, CRA has, in more than one occasion, looked through that contract. They've also looked through the relationship that the staffing agency provides, which actually used to be an actual barrier of protection. But it was a veil that was ultimately pierced a number of years ago and doesn't help to support our issue anymore. But that detailed written contract is key. And again, members of the NACCB have sample contracts that they all work with. And we know that we hope that anyone working with an agency has a really strongly worded written contract. Believe it or not, I have seen cases where end clients or applicants have tried to go direct, and the end client has taken a full-time employee contract and reworded it, like they pulled it off Google or whatever they've done, and then use it as an independent contractor contract, which is incredibly dangerous, as you can imagine. The other thing we recommend is having a business presence. And this is, again, there to support the proof that these people are independent contractors. For example, it's very common for CRA to look at social media when they're going through a personal service business case. And if the independent contractor has listed, I'm an employee at XYZ company, that's potentially dangerous. Whereas if they say I'm an independent contractor, and then they also have a website that supports that they're an independent contractor, and they have a corporation with a corporate name that ties back to that website, things look a lot cleaner from a presentation standpoint. And then the last thing is contractor conduct. And again, this is where the independent contractor can put their foot in their mouth, because the only way that they're going to determine contractor contact is by doing an outreach program and asking questions. And so this is why we really do want to stand up and fight and defend for the independent contractor, because we know that CRA has announced this new special project. We know that there's going to be outreach going on to the community. We want to make sure that that outreach is flowing back to us or to other members of the NACCB, so that can be bubbled up so that we can defend this as an industry-wide issue rather than trying to hit the gopher as it pops out of each individual hole. And like I said, we've been doing this since 1984. and we have been championing the rights of the independent contractors since then. Back in those early 80s, it was more sort of in-house MIS services, and we were on the forefront of enabling this independent contractor market that allows this structure that is truly win-win, right? The independent contractor is getting a higher hourly rate and able to keep more of what they're earning in their pocket. The staffing agencies, well, it's a higher hourly rate, it's a lower overall cost, plus they have a little bit more flexibility and adaptability to market changes. And then the staffing agencies have the benefit of, instead of it being a one-time lump sum, it's an ongoing payment for as long as the independent contractor is on contract. So it's win-win. But if we want to enable and make sure that this community thrives, we have to support it, and we have to make sure that we're bubbling up this information to the community that can support it. So as I said, we have been very successful over the years, and we've fought and won all of our major PSC cases, and again, with the help and support of the NACCB. Of course, for those of you who want to make sure you're never deemed to be a PSC, so if we do have any contractors out there, hey, have more than 5 employees, then you're by definition of the personal service business, not a personal service business, although that's pretty rare, and we don't see that very often. So what are the next steps you can take? So again, that strong, clearly worded written contract, a work relationship that supports the contract, limiting contract length. That's why you do see a number of major banks saying, hey, 2 years cap rate, and then you got to go on sabbatical or something else. Diversifying your client base is always a great thing. However, keep in mind that CRA has never won a case based on how long you were on contract or the fact that you only had one contract. There are many cases that we have in our proprietary 76-page document that goes through all the case law that indicates many cases fought and won where the independent contractor was on one contract for an extended period of time. It might be used as a identifying factor by CRA. It has never been used by a judge as a determining factor at the end of it. So of course, implement asset protection strategies so that if you are ever assessed to be a PSB, if structured properly, you can fold up the company and continue on without your assets being exposed. And that's what we talked about earlier, but some asset protection, some limited liability. And again, this is where an accounting professional is going to help you to do that. Control your work. Again, the client can control what you do, but not how you do it. Get liability insurance. We're big fans of liability insurance. LMS is probably the largest individual provider of this. They have great programs that works with many of the staffing agencies out there. But any liability insurance is good liability insurance because by definition, liability is insuring against a risk. And again, one of the criteria for being an independent contractor is mitigating or is having risk for profit or loss. Again, build that professional profile, have a website, have social media like LinkedIn that supports that you're an independent contractor, have a company name that reflects what you do, even if it's, I'd rather it be your personal name incorporated than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 incorporated, because businesses do business with businesses, not with numbered companies. Numbered companies are often used as shells and lots of other reasons that you use a numbered company, but not for doing business. And lastly, hire an experienced professional that is knowledgeable to represent you, and don't put your foot in your mouth. Again, how we do that is we've got our unique audit representation protection. So if they're a client of ours, they're covered by our audit representation protection. We'll go up to the third and final stage of appeals. We also have a proprietary 76-page response to any CRA attacks or audits. We slap that on the desk of most auditors. A lot of them don't even want to read it, and it sends them running for the hills. For those of them that do read it, it adequately points out why our clients are not independent contractors and goes through all the supporting case law over the years where we have fought and won rights for independent contractors. The last time there was a special initiative, we did prepare a sample response to the CRA questionnaire. We have not seen the questionnaire come across our desk yet this year with this new initiative that started in June of this year and is running through to end of December. But if you have any end clients who have received this questionnaire, we would be happy to work with you to provide a sample response that can be shared amongst the industry. And again, for those of you who might want to search out more information on this, there is the Employee versus Contractor Guide, which is Guide RC 4110. It's a CRA guide. It's written from the CRA perspective. Just take it with a grain of salt, but it helps you understand their perspective on it. There's also that secret CPP and EI information bulletin that we mentioned to you before, which does outline the reality that your knowledge of tools is the knowledge that you bring, or the ownership of tools is the knowledge you bring, not the physical tools. It also is the first win that we had as the IT industry to actually start pointing out that, hey, the knowledge worker is different, the IT industry is different. And that was, maybe the start of what we ended up getting as far as these wins, Employment Standards Act, as well as some of the stuff we're doing on WSIB and all the work. Now, right now, the good news is we have about 2.5 years of a majority government here in Ontario who, as they just explained to us today, there is a void in policy. So they have lots of opportunity to implement change with this majority government, but they actually have a void in policy. They are actively looking to work with industry experts to be able to help build this policy and create it. So we have a unique opportunity, at least here in Ontario. Federally, it's a different story, and other provinces, it's a different story as well. But we are making great strides as an industry with what we're being able to see here. But what is really important to make sure that when the next government comes in place, that these aren't ultimately overturned, is we're able to demonstrate that this is in the best interest of the economy and the industry as a whole, and that this is something that the independent contractors are not concerned about, and that the end clients are happy with, and that this solves an issue within the industry, which I think it adequately does. And our next step, I can tell you, we're continuing on our efforts, moving to a federal level and trying to see what we can do on the CRA initiative as well. So I gave you guys a windfall of information. We do have about 8 more minutes to open it up for Q&A. And if anyone has any questions, please post them in the Q&A. And I want to thank you guys all for taking time out of your day today to come and hear about some of the important industry updates. And we can tell you we are committed to working with you guys. We are sort of doing the circuit right now, going out and talking with individual agencies as well. Some of you I know have invited us out to come and talk to your agencies. If we do work with you, we do provide special pricing to agencies that we have a relationship, which provides an incredible price. I'm not going to say it here because it's only available if you work with us on the incorporation that makes it a real no-brainer for the independent contractor. We also develop custom landing pages so that if you have a base of clients or independent contractors that need some really targeted information so that your team can refer them on to this portal, which will have the answers to those common questions that you're getting over and over again. I know one of the big ones we're getting right now is a lot of people wonder, hey, if I incorporate, what about getting a mortgage, stuff like that. So that seems to be a big issue we're developing a whole bunch of content on. And it does look like we've got our very first question that's come up. Let's take a look at what it's got in here. Can I send you a copy of the slides? We will certainly make these available online. There is also a copy of this presentation being recorded and aired live on Facebook. It will also be on our YouTube channel. But we'll make sure the slide deck is available. I'll probably do it on LinkedIn SlideShare. And then I'll get Rachel to reach back out to you with a copy of the slide deck as well. And again, if any of you are interested in building a deeper relationship with our organization so that we can better support you and your recruiters, please do reach out to either myself or our customer service team. You can give us a call at 1-800-465-7532 and either connect with Rachel or Karen, or email customerservice@cpa4it, and we'll be happy to reach out and connect with you. So again, Rachel or Karen, any other closing comments before we wrap?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you very much, Andrew. So I will also be just sending a bit of a follow-up to all of the attendees. And we just want to say thank you very much again for joining. Myself and Karen, in terms of the role that we play, we are the individuals that provide the initial consultation with the independent contractors. So a lot of individuals coming in with a lot of questions, You don't have to answer them. That's what we're here for. And as Andrew did also indicate, for a lot of the firms that we're working with, we do provide a customized landing page with a lot of this information, different calculator tools. So, we've always been a resource for the staffing agencies, and we look to continue the relationship with you guys.
Awesome. And on that note, doesn't look like there's any further questions, which means we either did an amazing job or we did a terrible job. I'm not sure which.
I think we did a great job. I was monitoring the participation. We only lost about 4 people throughout the session. So many hung on. So thank you so very much.
And I know Karen and Rachel will certainly say kudos to you. I thought you guys did a great job. Thank you. And
thank you, Andrew.
We'll see everyone hopefully around the industry, and looking forward to the next golf tournament next summer, hopefully. Okay, bye for now, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.